Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Mary Balliet. I am the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of Potential Power Nutrition. We're going to have a short video today on the take-home message of the enzyme defect known as COMT. Let's dig in. So to begin with, 20 to 30% of Caucasians of European descent have this enzyme defect. So an enzyme does a reaction, and the reaction that we're going to talk about momentarily about COMT is to detoxify estrogen and adrenaline in particular. So how do you know if you are in that 20 to 30% of European descent who have this? Well, let's say you're not feeling your best. Has anybody ever told you you're a bit impulsive? Do you sometimes feel like I have a little bit of an addiction to, say, sugar, or I've had a bad day, I have to have a drink, or am I easily dissatisfied? Is it really hard some days to get off the couch? Am I easily distracted, or I have a diagnosis of ADHD? Or am I agitated when especially I'm interrupted? So where should I look for my ancestry when I talk about where our parents and grandparents have come from, or we've done 23andMe? Where is this enzyme defect in the population? It appears to be descended from the Vikings. If we look over here, are you descended from the Vikings? We see that in this red area of Norway and Denmark, and then even this area of Sweden, this is where the Vikings started. But they were world travelers, and they traveled from Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and they went to Iceland and Greenland and North America, the British Isles, including Ireland, the entire northern coast of Europe. So that is everything from Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Germany, Normandy in France, the upper border of Spain, Portugal, northern border of Africa, and southern Italy. Additionally, Finland, Russia, Ukraine, all of this area, that if you're descended from any of these places, then it is possible that you have this enzyme defect. So what does that mean? It means that you're going to have symptoms because you're having trouble breaking down adrenaline in particular and estrogen. So that means I can get either anxious or depressed. If I have estrogen dominance, then that means estrogen staying around too long. I can have a prolonged period. I can have menopause symptoms. I can have hormonal imbalances. Dopamine, which is a catecholamine that's made right before you make adrenaline, if that goes up too high, then you can be very aggressive. Or if it goes down to an impulsive and can have tremor, and if it goes down, you can have mental and emotional fatigue and mood disorders. Like somebody says, hey, you seem a little moody. Maybe you've been diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, or you yourself know you're really tired. Your body aches. I don't feel like eating. If I do eat, I feel nauseous or even like I'm going to throw up. I have low blood pressure. I get up quick from a chair and I feel really faint. I am starting to lose my hair. Hair is coming out in the shower. I start to get age spots on my skin, and I crave salt and sugar like potato chips, refined carbohydrates with salt. That is a real telltale sign that your adrenals are really getting exhausted. The liver also uses this enzyme to detoxify things, especially alcohol, drugs, caffeine. And so if I have this enzyme, they do not eat defect. I do not do that well. And so now I really can't have that second drink, or I'm getting a hangover, or caffeine is making me jittery. When I have immune system imbalances, I can either be depressed and I can get sick easily, or I can be hypervigilant and have allergies. So if you have anything on this slide, then it's likely that you do in fact have this enzyme defect of COMT. What does it actually do? Well, it has a job that when it's working 100% perfectly, it converts the sex hormones, particularly estrogen, and the stress hormones, particularly adrenaline, to a metabolite or a product that actually is protective against cardiovascular disease and cancer. But when you have the enzyme defect, the most common decrease, it's not like you don't have it, it just works slower. How much slower? 25 to 50% slower. What does that mean? Well, let's say it works 50% slower. Somebody has something that happened, they're upset for 2 days. It's going to take you 4 days to get better. But at 25%, if it takes them 2 days, it's going to take you 8 days or 4 times longer to get better. What's the chance that in 8 days, something else is going to happen? And this is why if you're at that lower end, at that 25%, you're constantly in a state where you stay in this adrenal fatigue, this anxiety, all of the things we said. You can be impulsive, all the things on the slide. That's really the reason. You kind of stay there all the time. Additionally, when you do not methylate, that's what it stands for, catecholamine O-methyltransferase. If you can't put that methyl group, which makes it protected, then you actually get a reactive oxygen species that is called a radical. And you know radicals are always blowing things up. So what are they blowing up? Your cardiovascular system. They're causing hormonal cancers like breast cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer. So we really want this to work well. So say we do have this enzyme defect and it is only working at 25%. We want it to have every single thing it needs. We can't be deficient in anything because we're already slowed down. So what is it that we have to do so that we can work at our maximum efficiency, even if we're working slower than if we had it working 100%? So these are the solutions so that you can do the best job, even if it's taking you longer to get there. The first and most important thing is adequate sleep. The reason that adequate sleep is so critically important and having a good night's sleep is that if you do have disordered sleep, if you're not getting that nice deep sleep, this thing called slow wave sleep, then you actually are making these catecholamines like adrenaline while you're sleeping, not even because you're running away from something that's chasing you. It's actually during sleep, you're even having stress. And therefore, we have to do good sleep hygiene. That means we have to go to bed and get up the same time, Monday through Monday. We have to have a great bedtime routine. We have to not have caffeine afternoon or maybe no caffeine at all because caffeine needs this enzyme. And so if I have it, it's going to work slower and it's going to take up some of that bandwidth, as the kids say. I have to do the right exercise. I have to figure out how to reduce my stress that we're going to talk about in terms of like having yoga kinds of things that's going to reduce your stress. We want to turn off our electronics at least an hour before bed, and we don't want to have a large fatty meal right before we go to sleep. So these are the tips for really good sleep hygiene. We want to make some dietary changes. We need to have a lot of protein, 20 to 30 grams every single meal. I think that's the literature. Some men I think can have a little bit more, but we really want to be there every meal. And we want to avoid NutraSweet, which is aspartame. That's in a lot of diet foods. NutraSweet contains phenylalanine. Phenylalanine becomes tyrosine, and that's the precursor to the catecholamines. And remember, this is called catecholamine O-methyltransferase, meaning I'm going to break down the catecholamines. Now I do this, I make more catecholamines. I put even more work on the table. I'm already slow. I don't need more work. I want to have more fiber. It is important that some of the testosterone in men and the majority of testosterone in women becomes estrogen. And that estrogen needs this enzyme to become that cardioprotective and anti-cancer product. When I want to get rid of excess testosterone or estrogen, it needs to go through my liver and go out through the bile because it's a fat soluble vitamin. I need to pull that out with fiber, especially cruciferous. Vegetables are really important for this, like the broccoli, the kale, the cabbage, the Brussels sprouts. I want to have beets. That's very important for bile flow. So I could eat some beets every day. Could be canned beets, still works. Radishes are really great. And in the liver, I always sort of burn anything, the hormones, and then I have to put the fire out. And so I need antioxidants so that, again, I want to put the ash out, not something on fire. So turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, all the antioxidants. I want to be able to make bile because that's how it's going to go out into the colon. The only way for bile to flow is to eat fat at every meal. And I want to have those essential fatty acids like linoleic and alpha-linolenic. Now, one thing that has, it's not the only thing, but flax seeds do have that. So you can think about having a dedicated coffee grinder, get some flax seeds, grind them, put them in the freezer, a tablespoon a day, probably going to meet that amount that you need for these essential fatty acids. But there are other things, and you can look for that as well. You want to have adequate vitamin C. So that is in fruits. Now, vitamin C is in anything that has yellow color. So even though we say fruits and we think oranges and lemons, it's anything that has a color, including gala apples, Yukon Gold potatoes, peppers, all those things are high in vitamin C. You want to have those. We want to limit our caffeine because that has to be broken down. And again, it's just one more thing and you're already going slow. And we want to limit our alcohol. Same idea, already going slow. Let's not add one more thing. Now, there's a lot of talk about intermittent fasting, and intermittent fasting is great for some people. Not if you have COMT, though. If you have COMT, when you don't eat on a schedule, now you're not hungry, you're hangry. You're actually making a catecholamine to raise your blood sugar called epinephrine or adrenaline. So you don't want to be skipping meals. So if you have that feeling of hangry, that's a problem. You want to eat on a regular interval. Because when you have a downregulated COMT enzyme, going a long time without eating will not allow your blood sugar to stay even. Now, people who have trouble with their blood sugar, sure, intermittent fasting, great for them. That's why there's not one thing that works for everyone. Now, what about foods that contain lithium? Why lithium, right? Because you say, well, you were a little moody, right? But the reason is that lithium is an important cofactor, a mineral that really helps make the good forms of all the vitamins. So when you take a vitamin, it has to become activated. And we have to be very careful about what forms of all the vitamins we take. So we want to have some lithium. It's really going to help this enzyme. So what is it contained in? Cereal, especially oats. I would eat those organic. Otherwise, they have Roundup in them, which is very bad for you. And we have a little talk about that. Potatoes, tomatoes, cabbage. That sounds like all those areas we saw that the Vikings went to. These are foods that people ate. And mineral water, spring water. Not all spring water or mineral water has it in there, but a lot does. But potatoes, tomatoes, cabbage, that is really big. And then also some oats. So you want to eat at least one serving. That would be a cup of something like this every single day. What about the B vitamins? I really want to make sure I can do that M thing, which is called the methyl transfer reaction. And methylation pathway takes folic acid and B12. Now, if I have MTHFR, which is the most famous of all the genetic defects, I absolutely have to make sure that I have folic acid as folic acid, which becomes folate the minute it hits your intestines, and methylcobalamin. When I have that combination, I'm able to do the methylation correctly. And many of us who have COMT also have MTHFR. So very important not to methylate both the folic acid and the cobalamin. If I don't have MTHFR, then I can make methylfolic acid. So in my opinion, based on the new literature, there is never a case for folic acid and cobalamin to both be methylated. So look at your vitamins, make sure they're not. Make sure that your cobalamin, though, is methylated. That's very important for both MTHFR and COMT. And methylcobalamin is naturally made by the activity of bacteria on red meat. But a lot of people don't eat a lot of red meat. And so it's very important to have it in your vitamins. You don't want cyanocobalamin. You want extra magnesium because it's a magnesium dependent pathway as well. And again, we really want to help that liver out. We want those antioxidants, the turmeric and the ginger. What exercise really works? Well, it's really important to use up the adrenaline. And we want to exercise at our target heart rate for fat burning. We make a lot more money when we burn fats than when we burn sugar. And that's going to keep everything more even for this pathway. So you just take 220, you minus your age, and then you do 60 to 70% of that. That's your fat burning zone. You really want to be there when you're doing activity. That's why you have to worry about very strenuous activity. In some really strenuous activities, your heart rate could get too high, and now that's going to actually cause more problems than less problems. So this is a person that really needs to know their target heart rate. That's really good for this. And the literature shows, and actually we did a study at the college about this, that if you lie in Shavasana, in yoga, which is this pose here. You see how his hands up, his arms are turned out, he's laying flat. It's called dead man's or corpse pose. This for 10 minutes will lower not only your adrenaline, which is one of the catecholamines, but also your cortisol, which is the thing that causes you to get belly fat. So it's really, really important. So a really nice time to do this sometimes is just before you go to sleep, because we said sleep hygiene is so important. Let's do a little 10 minutes of Shavasana. That would be a great bedtime routine to have a great night's sleep. If you have questions, we have a much longer video with a lot of the biochem, and you just can click on that link, or you can email me at mbelliet@potentialpowernutrition.com. For all of us who are so driven and are really struggling with this, it's just going to be so great if we can make these changes, because we get the best benefit because we have this, but it's just working a little slower. We can really support this pathway.